Rifle or pistol, wrong argument. Which one should I start with? It's the wrong argument. What? I think it's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. Recently at the filming of this, who knows when this is going to come out, on Pastor Fox's Patreon page, I suggest you go there. The question was asked, and it's been asked multiple times before, do I start with a pistol, or do I start with a rifle, or, do I start with the Carl Gustav? I think it's the wrong argument. Why are someone asking that question? And this might offend the person that asked the question. That's not my intention. And Pastor Fox had a very well thought out and logical advice for people. What do I think? I think it's the wrong argument. It's training. It's training. And people don't want to hear that because the question almost has a kit-focused thing to it, doesn't it? Tell me what to buy, and then I have my full sense of security, and I'll put it in a gun safe, and it can, be my security blanket. Like, was that Linus on what was that, Charlie Brown? Yeah. I think that's the issue. I think it's the wrong argument. Most of us that really can utilize in defensive and even offensive scenarios, weapons, we didn't start with a pistol. We just didn't. For lots of reasons. One is many of us started our education early on. And if you're asking that very question, which one first, handgun or rifle, because now you see threats and you're like, oh, that tells me a few things. One is you're wanting justification for a purchase, possibly. I'm not saying it's true, but possibly that is a thing. Do you even know why they're different colored? Threat, no threat, training, not training. Different philosophies. When I set up mannequins for visual threats, there's different tools in order to train. And I want everyone in the training to know what's what, right? What's what? Well, what should you get first? Well, training is the answer. Training in what? Well, I would say most people won't carry, or will not, and it may take years or unfortunately some type of incident in order for them to actually carry a protection device of any sort. That's an easy start point. The pocket clipped folder that is legal in your area. Why do I say that? Because you're probably going to use it more every day, opening Amazon boxes. And the ability to cut and the ability to start fire are the most basics. And if you didn't start with a rifle as a kid, you may not have a blade education. Now, you probably know how to use a kitchen knife to cut up vegetables, but it's probably dull. So you don't really understand it. You probably had, I'm guessing, no training in the defensive use of a blade. You see, there comes a thing with hand size. I remember as a kid with my Barlow folder, I had a Puma lockback. I think was my first official knife I was given at a very, very early age. And a Barlow folder. a buck 110 on a belt, because that was cool, you know, before the pocket clips came out. And then since the pocket clips, pretty much, well, everyday use, everyday carry, a pocket clip folder, it goes with me in the shower. What? Yeah. And as soon as I put my Ranger panties on, guess what? That gets clipped in the inside of my waistband. And I've habitually been doing that for a long time, decades. There are situations where you can't have a blade, like on an airplane now. But if you understand what can cut and what can't, you're not really unarmed. And so the basic education is a blade education. Even more importantly is the foundation of physicality. Well, physicality fades. You know, think of it this way. And someone asking that question to me is someone who's very new to using firearms as a defensive tool, which I do recommend you do. Learn how to use, be safe first, have training. A 5-year-old wielding a blade could cut someone and hurt someone. A 90-year-old wielding a blade could cut someone and hurt someone. And so, you know, you hear the mantra, Sam Colt making everybody equal. Well, guess what was before Sam Colt? This stood the test of time, that's met our needs. You know, tooth, fang, and claw is how animals survive, the predatory animals survive out in the woods. It's the basics first. It's the basics of a blade. It's the basics of a blade. If you have the basics of a blade down, now you're never unarmed if you understand how a corner can cut. You understand edges differently, right? So the order is stick blade rifle globally. Why? Because you can find a stick of a diameter where someone can hold it. It's very, very difficult for young shooters to have, there's a grip girth size that's generally the issue with starting out shooting. Now, there's certain guns that are built with smaller, skinnier grips. You see that especially with the older revolvers, right? But I would say that no one's going to argue with me that rifles are easier to shoot than handguns. Now, are they as portable? No. What's more portable than all of them? A blade. Find me a 9mm pistol that weighs the same as this, right? Portability is king. And if you're not going to carry a blade, I think you got the order wrong. I've been learning how to use a blade effectively, which is not just, well, I cut up some carrots, right? There's a reason why militaries start with a rifle and not a handgun. You don't even see handguns, last I heard, in basic training. You see all kinds of other stuff. Why? Because what's the queen of battle? It's not a handgun. Very few people have killed animals with handguns. Have you killed animals with handguns? Have you hunted big game with a handgun? And so when you start using that as a crucible of like, okay, well, what are your odds of being in a defensive shooting? Are you just carrying your gun for one thing? I had an uncle years ago that used to carry a .22 revolver loaded with birdshot for snakes because he was deathly afraid of snakes. That was his threat, and he killed all kinds of snakes with that .22. If you're not going to carry it, it doesn't really matter. If you don't have the training, it doesn't really matter. It's not a caliber argument or a weapon argument. It's a portability and training argument. How much training are you going to invest? How much dollars? If you're in a financial straits where it's either or, it's kind of like, well, should I dig a well or use rain catchment? Well, rain catchment's generally cheaper, but if you live where there's no rain, well, probably not that effective. The order that most people learn is rifle before pistol because it's easier and it's more effective. And a matter of fact is you can start training with even military grade systems at a younger age to be able to effectively use. You see that all over the world globally with the child soldiers that are wielding AKs and ARs, right? It's just a fact. It doesn't care about your feelings. The principle is to be prepared and stay armed. Well, if you're not carrying a knife, well, then that's an issue. That's like people that ask for a blade, adult men who ask for a blade should be ashamed. Well, why aren't you carrying a blade? And a lot of people who tout, their battle belt and all this other stuff, they don't carry a gun habitually. I've got a shotgun on my back right now fixing to go do PT. And so your context becomes key. What are you going to use it for? Self-defense? Okay, maybe. Make sure you dot all your I's and cross all your T's and get a carry permit so you look like one of the good guys. Get real training so you know what to say if that happens. That's even more important. So you don't, end up locked up for trying to protect yourself. You need, to navigate that, you need a gladiator. You need people that have really thought it through. There's a lot of really good training programs out there, Lethal Force Institute, Firearms Academy of Seattle, stuff of that nature, that can arm you with that other fight, which would be the legal fight. Oftentimes, depending on where you live, you may not be able to carry a blade of a certain length. I think Colorado's that way. I think it's like, you'd have to consult it, but it's under 4 inches if I remember correctly. And so your options are limited on what you can and cannot do based off your context. And I can tell you, having traveled all over the world, other than a very few times, flying commercial where they wouldn't let me, one of the first things I would procure is a blade. Because it changes my odds in the survival spectrum more rapidly than anything else. In a lot of places where they can't have handguns, the big knife is their answer, whether that be machete or kukri or parang. That is the answer. The bayonet, the spirit of the bayonet is a thing. So you know what the pointy end is. Not that you're going to go do Pickett's charge, but it's used to teach the aggressiveness, right? There's a reason for stick blade rifle, the pugil stick, the bayonet in training martial skills. There's a real reason why people start with sticks as kids in parts of Asia. Go against a canine. Well, you much rather have a stick than your bare hands, right? So fight smarter than a monkey, which is something one of my instructors, my Tuhans, told me is, hey, you need to fight smarter than a monkey. Fill your hands. Yeah, with something. Learn how to hit with something. A force multiplier, right? Handguns they help extend your range, and I do echo what Clint Smith says too. It's handguns to fight your way to your rifle you shouldn't have left in the first place. So maybe you need to train in situational awareness more. Or figuring out a system, hey, is this really my fight? Maybe the best thing for you to do is your leather personnel carriers and getting your 0 to 300 meter time down so you can get off the X. Your physicality. Rather than trying to throw dollars at it, what's your martial training with your bare hands or with your feet? Who says you have to sit there and go toe-to-toe with some prize fighter? Why don't you just run away? Ego, most likely. Most people, it's all brandism. Well, I think this and I think that. Well, if you can get off the X, get off the X. It's shoot, move, communicate, sustain. Move is required, right? This has been another free lesson from Survival Applications Weapon Systems. If you want to know more, go to my Patreon page, follow the links. You'll also see me over at Tabor Source Rex's Patreon page. And we've got this awesome blessing of water from above. I hope this finds you well. Your access to certain mentors and instructors is a very short window. Carry rucksacks, not feelings bags. See you soon. Shalom.